Good morning, everybody. I'm Muriel Bowser. We are located in the headquarters of the Metropolitan Police Department. I'm joined by Chief of Police Pamela Smith, Deputy Mayor for Public Safety Lindsay Apida, and the City Administrator for the District, Kevin Donahue. I'm Muriel Bowser, the Mayor of Washington, D.C. We are here today in our Joint Operations Command Center to provide a public safety update, to review crime trends and initiatives that we have put in place over the last year. I want to start by thanking MPD. I want to thank all of our public safety teams, local and federal, and the agencies that support their work. I want to acknowledge the hard work and leadership of Councilmember Brooke Pinto, who is the Ward 2 council member and the council's lead on public safety and justice, who work with us to pass common sense public safety legislation. And I, of course, want to thank Washingtonians, business owners, visitors who we asked for support, whether it was putting up crime cameras, calling in suspicious activity, calling their council members to weigh in on how important it was to rebalance our public safety issue. I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you even for coming out to community meetings and letting us know exactly what the impact of crime had been on your family or community, and how important it is that we have been able to move common sense legislation forward and work hand in hand with MPD and our violence interrupter programs to make the district safer. And because of that work, we will talk to you with some specificity today about how we got to a 35% decrease in violent crime in the district in a year's time, how we cut carjackings by nearly 50% in the same amount of time. And the chief will show in just a few moments, compared to last year, how crime is down in every category. And violent crime and overall crime are lower today than they were before the pandemic. So we'll highlight these initiatives. We'll be able to answer a few of your questions and talk about how important it is that we don't look back, and also that we don't retreat to policies that led to spikes in crime. So I want to turn now to talk a little bit, as we were, I guess, maybe a year and a half ago, we presented the following slides to you that talked about, over a 10-year period of time, how our public safety ecosystem had changed. You might remember that we outlined this and we talked about how we were going to address all of the troubling points. I think we all knew then that changes had been made to the ecosystem over a 15-year period of time that were having a very negative effect on public safety in our city. So I want to thank and give a big shout out to our public safety team that put a lot of work into strategic fixes that were represented in our Safer, Stronger 2.0 legislation, as well as Act Now. And most of those provisions were included in Secure DC, the omnibus legislation that passed last March. So with that, I want to turn it over to Deputy Mayor Apida to talk a little bit more about how we rebalance the public safety ecosystem and our work ahead.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you for your leadership and continued support of our work. So as the mayor has said repeatedly, it was important for us to rebalance our public safety and justice ecosystem. We had gotten out of balance, particularly with accountability. And we worked very hard with the council, with stakeholders, with residents and businesses and others to propose common sense legislation that would help us to have immediate impact. And so that's what we saw. Provisions that were in Secure DC, or the Safer, Stronger Amendment 2.0, the Act Now, the Prioritizing Public Safety Amendment Act, the Emergency Act from last summer, and finally culminating in Secure DC. which the mayor signed in March, have really helped us to have impact in driving down crime. There are a lot of provisions in Secure DC, and so just covering some of them that we thought were key in helping us to both drive down crime and also to help our residents feel safe. We often say that being safe and feeling safe are key priorities of ours in public safety. And so drug-free zones, the chief will talk more about what that's looked like, but we had proposed reviving provisions around anti-loitering drug-free zones that would allow MPD to really interrupt activity that we had seen that was increasing. And one of the things that we said that was critically important to us was to allow our residents to reclaim public space, that it wasn't simply about arresting people for offenses, but really about interrupting activity and allowing residents to reclaim public space. And we've really seen that has had impact. Organized retail theft, certainly last year we were seeing significant increases like our counterparts across the country in organized retail theft. And so working very closely with our retailers, large and small, and our residents who show up and showed up at these hearings to really help council hear how important this is to communities where the loss of some of these retail organizations would have significant impact. Hearing from residents that this matters, we were able to get criminal penalties for standalone offense for organized retail theft, and MPD has made nearly 1,000 arrests in the theft space. And then the rebuttable presumption of pretrial detention. One of the things that the mayor has been clear about over time, always stood on, is that people who we have to remove at times from community or give prosecutors and the courts the tools to make that decision, those who will inflict violence upon our communities, those who will use guns in community. And so strengthening the rebuttable presumption of pretrial detention did a couple of things. One, more people with violent offenses were being held pretrial. Our current population at the DC jail is 1957, which is more in line with our pre-pandemic numbers. We've gotten down to the 1200s. And in the breakdowns, which we post, a lot of data also came out through security, so you can see what the breakdown is. There are more people with violent offenses being held, and we are seeing the impact of that in community. The other piece of that isn't often talked about, but that is important, is trust. We have asked our residents, businesses, and others all the time, you see something, say something, and to help us close cases. Well, in order for that to be the case in some places, seeing someone who people know has committed a violent offense or otherwise back in community was eroding trust that they would be kept safe, those who help us. And so that the strengthening of that rebuttable presumption both helped community be safer generally and also strengthened the trust that we can keep people safe and that then they can participate with us in the process of case closure. And so those are some of the key provisions of Secure DC, along with significant amounts of data that's being released that really helps us to continue to refine our strategies using data and evidence as to what's happening in our community and to make adjustments accordingly. And so with that, we often say policing, good policy is critically important, but so is good constitutional policing, and having laws that support the ability of MPD to do that and our federal partners has been vitally important. And so I'm going to turn to the chief now to walk us through our progress and some of the initiatives that have helped us drive down crime this year. Chief.
Good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us in our Joint Command Operations Center this morning. I want to thank Mayor Bowser, the City Administrator, and Deputy Mayor Lindsay Appiah for your continued support of the Metropolitan Police Department. It is certainly their support that has led to the driving success that we see today with regards to how crime is trending in the District of Columbia. When I became chief about a year ago, I had to take a look at crime as it was happening in real time. I had the opportunity to meet with the mayor. I initially started looking at crime from a 3-year period going back. The mayor tasked me with looking at pre-pandemic numbers. And so we began to look at crime, all of our violent crime, from robberies, carjackings, homicides, as well as our juvenile crime. I spent a lot of time over the first year just really focused on meeting with members in our community, our faith-based organizations, our faith-based leaders, our stakeholders,
and many members across this city to really help us in the space of what crime looked like at that time and how they would be instrumental in supporting us with some of the challenges that we were seeing. So we began at the Metropolitan Police Department to look at crime from a macro level. We began analyzing a lot of the trends that were occurring and some of the pattern offenses that we continued to see. I also noted that I needed to also implement daily crime briefings here at the Metropolitan Police Department, so that not only are we addressing crime, but the leadership that are in their areas of responsibility are really focused on knowing exactly how to follow their crime, but also understanding the trends and crimes that were happening. And more importantly for us was being able to ensure that we can get our community back to a place where we can start to feel safe again. As I've said once before, even if one resident feels unsafe in our community, there's still more work for us to do. I'm very pleased with the numbers with where we are today. We will continue to fight crime without stopping. We will continue to fight crime without giving up. And in this city, we will continue to fight crime without losing motivation. And here is what our crime looks like and where we stand today with only 3 weeks left in the year. In every major category of violent crime and property crime that we track, we see that there are reductions compared to the same time last year. Violent crime is down 35% and down 16% compared to 2019 before the pandemic. Homicides are down 29% today, where we are sitting with 73 fewer homicides than where we were last year. As I've oftentimes stated, that one loss of life in our city is one too many, and please be assured that our detectives and our officers will continue to work very hard to hold those who are committing these crimes accountable in our city. Robberies are also down 39%, with a 48% reduction in carjackings included in that count. We're continuing to see a reduction in trend in our assaults with dangerous weapons, which is down 29%, and which culminates in our 35% overall reduction in violent crime. In addition to these violent crime reductions, our property crime is also down 12%. We are also seeing a 26% drop in vehicle theft and a 15% drop in theft from autos, which gives us a district-wide total crime reduction of 15%. To us, these significant crimes reductions are significant, but we also owe a great deal of gratitude and appreciation to the members who have worked around the clock this last year to achieve these outcomes and to really hold criminals that have committed these crimes responsible. Crime is also lower now than it was before the pandemic, when we saw how our public safety ecosystem was a little bit unbalanced. As you notice, there's a lot of data on this slide here, but it tells the story of how we're making sustained progress on keeping Washingtonians safe. Again, violent crime is down 16% compared to 2019, with a 35% drop in assault with dangerous weapons, and it's 26% drop in sex abuse compared to 5 years ago. We also had a 13% reduction in property crime compared to 2019, with a 37% drop in theft from autos and a 20% drop in burglary. Our total crime in 2024 in Washington is down 13% compared to 2019. So what is the why behind these numbers? I can attribute it to the hard work of the men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department. Day in and day out, our officers are showing up in community. We are fighting crime. We are connecting with community, and we're doing everything we can to drive crime down in our city. That, paired with our whole of government approach to fighting crime in Washington, D.C., is the reason why you're seeing the real results today. One of the best examples of our Homicide Reduction Partnership Plan is one of the reasons why we've seen such a reduction. In January, we launched THRIVE, which stands for Targeted Homicide Reduction Through Intervention and Violence Elimination. One of the things that we did was we looked at a strategy that we oftentimes use prior to my arrival, which was a 3-year look back at different areas, and we considered that to be our summer crime initiatives. What I tasked the team with earlier this year was that instead of waiting to the summer to fight crime, let's start fighting crime right now. I listened to our community members who talked about areas across our city that were really unsafe. We looked at the data going 3 years back, and what you'll see here on this slide is a decrease of 21% in total crimes in our Rosedale zone. We had a 40% reduction in total crime in our Anacostia zone, and a 38% decrease in our Washington Highland zone area. And homicides in all three areas have dropped primarily 67%. These were the three areas across the city where we saw a significant increase in our assault with deadly weapons, our homicides, and serious violent crime across our city. I've heard from community members. I think when I came on board, I hit the ground running, and these were the three areas that we knew we really had to address and look at our data, analyze a lot of our policies also that were a part of what we were seeing that was restricting us from being able to reduce crime in some of these areas. These reductions are being driven by the hard work and the high visibility of our officers. What was shared with me on many occasions was that we want to see officers out of the cars. We want to see officers in our communities, and this was an opportunity for us to really make good on the promises that I made to our community, that we will ensure that we have officers in our communities year-round working hard to drive down the gun violence in our city. The success of Operation Thrive this year is also a testament to the dedication of our partner agencies. We're not just increasing the number of officers in these spaces, but we're working with our partners such as DBH, Department of Behavioral Health, to bring in extra mental health counselors to help with some of the issues that we've seen. We're also working with ABCA on problematic establishments that could be drivers of gun violence, and we're also working with DPW on cleaning up areas, dumping trash, getting rid of abandoned vehicles, and working with many more of our agencies in this space. And we're doing all of this because we believe that if we have an entire all-of-government approach to drive crime down in our city, the results of what you're seeing today will culminate in having safer areas across our city. And that focus on, we also decided that we would stand up Operation Atlas, which is action teams leaving areas safer. And this initiative was launched in order to really look at quality of life crimes, those quality of life crimes that we've heard many members talk about with traffic violations, permits, fraudulent plates, and those things. We have a committed group of officers who predominantly come in on the evening hours to conduct what we call high visibility patrols in an area where data is showing us that crimes are at an all-time high or spiking. This visibility has disrupted offenders, causing us to focus on reducing speed, distracted driving, unregistered vehicles. We've issued over 1,600 notice of infractions through Atlas enforcement over the last year. I want to speak for a moment about the work of these officers. Most of these members who work Operation Atlas shifts are doing so voluntarily on overtime. These officers are willing to sacrifice time with their families because they bought into the mission that the work that we do from the quality of life crime perspective is also a significant driver to decreasing crime in our area. Atlas has made over 1,800 arrests, recovered 142 stolen vehicles, and seized over 122 weapons. We are increasing the sense of safety in our communities, and we'll continue to work with our partners to deploy resources in these areas across our city. In 2023, we knew we had a problem with a small group of offenders quickly committing robberies and carjackings in several areas across our city. To address this emergence issue, we looked at data and hotspot policing models to analyze areas repeatedly being hit by these suspects. The next step was to increase our presence in all of these spaces. So we initiated the Robbery Suppression Initiative just to make sure that we were really focused on the robberies and carjackings across our city. Our RSI is what we call it, deployed to very concentrated areas and are constantly moving around the city based on trends and what we are seeing in that moment, with the mission to disrupt these offenders repeatedly committing robberies and burglaries and carjackings across our city. Since launching this initiative in July, RSI has made over 563 arrests, recovered more than 426 guns, and during these deployments, these teams have also recovered 124 stolen vehicles. This intentional deployment strategy, both in terms of when and where offenses are being committed, is one of the main forces behind our 39% reduction in robberies across the district. To me, this is a tremendous reduction, and we'll continue to implement the staffing models to stay ahead of suspects who want to prey in our community. You heard Deputy Mayor Apia speak about our drug-free zones. One of the top concerns that we heard, and also I heard from our community entering this year, was about the need to curtail the use and sale of drugs in public spaces. As the Deputy Mayor mentioned, the passage of Secure DC allowed me to stand up drug-free zones for 5 days at a time. Since March, we've enforced a total of 89 drug-free zones across all 7 of our districts. Just 12 serious crimes have occurred in these 89 zones during the DFZ enforcement. I continuously hear positive feedback from our community members on the effectiveness of the drug-free zones. As a matter of fact, I think people were a little apprehensive about it initially, but now more members of our community and residential members are asking for us to increase our presence for drug-free zones across the city. As required by this legislation, each time a drug-free zone is established, we're giving at least 24-hour notice to that community, and we're posting signage around the boundary of the zone. We're also bringing in our partners such as Department of Behavioral Health and working to ensure that everyone in the area is receiving adequate resources, and we'll continue to stand up the drug-free zones throughout this next year. One of the other things that was also impacting our city were these motorcycle-driven vehicles. We started to hear more about it earlier this year, and there were a lot of concerns over the increased number of mopeds that we were seeing on our DC streets, particularly in our downtown area. There was a misconception, we believe, in community that these vehicles did not require a license or registration with the Department of Motor Vehicles. Based on those concerns, we launched Operation Ride Right in June to educate the community about DC laws related to motor-driven cycle operation. Any vehicle that travels more than 20 miles per hour requires a driver's license to operate, and it must be registered with DMV. Before enforcement began, we reiterated in all of our communities the need for these operators to be licensed. We had patrol districts disseminating informational bulletins to ensure that the community had a sense of awareness as to what was going to take place. In the initial phases of it, the intent was not for us to make the arrest or apprehend or take custody, if you will, of these type of mopeds. However, we found that it was an intent for us to make sure that people gain compliance. But as we continued on with this process, we saw that there were still others who were not willing to be in compliance. And so far, we've impounded more than 700 motor vehicle cycles. We've made nearly 150 arrests for no permit or operating without a license, and we've also issued more than 700 citations. Operation Ride Right enforcement will continue as we keep working to ensure that mopeds operating in the District of Columbia are registered and driven by licensed drivers who have insurance and are wearing their helmets. There was also some concerns about some of the marijuana establishments or marijuana dispensaries across our city. We have partnered, if you will, with ABCA, the Alcoholic Beverage and Cannabis Administration, to identify unlicensed establishments, and it is our intent to shut them down. Since launching our effort this summer, we have successfully closed 14 businesses. Once the illegal sale of drug products is observed by our investigators, a closure order is drafted and issued to ABCA. Once the business is closed, our investigators execute search warrants to seize illegal materials inside the business and prevent any further use of sale. In some cases, we've recovered hundreds of pounds of marijuana and illegal psychedelic mushrooms. Our efforts should send a message to many community members who are looking to launch these businesses that anyone operating an unlicensed business in our city will be held accountable. You must comply with the law or you will be shut down, and you could certainly face criminal charges. Our partnership with ABCA remains strong, and our investigators are going to continue to ramp up this effort. We cannot have businesses operating in our city or in a space that are not compliant with DC law, and any businesses skirting around the law will face consequences. One of the most important things I think since I've been in this space is looking at how, and when I say been in this space, specifically within the Metropolitan Police Department, is how we have invested in technology. Beyond looking at our crime fighting initiatives, I've worked since day one to prioritize getting MPD's technology upgraded to keep our department on the cutting edge. And thanks to the commitment of Mayor Bowser and the DC Council, in the FY25 budget, we've been able to make some incredible progress in modernizing our department. One of our greatest investment has been in the launch of our real-time crime center, right across the hall from where we are sitting right now in the center of the MPD headquarters. The real-time crime center, or the RTCC as we call it, has completely changed our approach to each and every criminal incident in our city. Our RTCC investigators work around the clock, monitoring calls in all 7 districts to track emerging crime trends and provide real-time information to our officers in the field. When a crime occurs, our investigators get to work combing through all of the camera networks to identify and disseminate suspect and vehicle images. This approach gets results. In 2023, too often we saw a small set of offenders rapidly committing a series of robberies or offenses across our city. With the Real-Time Crime Center, we are now putting the investigative pieces together faster. We're giving officers in the field critical lookout information to track down offenders and to apprehend and or make arrests. Some of these cases have been covered by you and your colleagues here in the room today, but I'll highlight a few that I think that shows just how much of a game changer our Real-Time Crime Center has proven to be this year. Earlier in October 6th, our officers responded to a fatal stabbing in the 1700 block of Lincoln Road Northeast. Within minutes of the stabbing call, RTCC investigators located surveillance video showing the suspect fleeing the crime scene and discarding the knife used in the murder in a nearby trash can. Our investigators immediately disseminated the video to our officers and detectives responding to the scene. Using that video, officers were able to canvass the neighborhood. We were able to locate the suspect and place him under arrest. Officers also secured the location where the weapon was discarded, greatly assisting our homicide detective with the future prosecution of this case. That suspect faces second-degree murder charges and remains held in custody today. In a time before the Real-Time Crime Center, it could have taken hours to locate and review the crucial footage, giving the suspect critical time to make good on their escape and the possibility of that knife never being found. This is just one example, but the work that contributed to a successful closure in this case plays out daily in our Real-Time Crime Center, and it is why all of us should be grateful to our mayor for the investment in this center. But none of the work our Real-Time Crime Center investigators could do is possible without our CCTV cameras, which also grew this year by 50 cameras thanks to the mayor's budget. Our network is up to 411 fixed cameras and 18 mobile cameras deployed strategically based on recent crime trends. Everyone here knows how video footage has become one of the most crucial pieces of investigative evidence. Cameras now play a role in nearly every case we investigate. When decided, we've been intentional in distributing suspect and vehicle images from our Real-Time Crime Center to the public. The posts include on this slide are just some of the instances where we pushed out images within an incident, within minutes of an incident occurring. In one shooting in our 6th district this summer, we pushed out suspect images in less than 20 minutes after the first call from that scene. And we're going to continue keeping our foot on the gas in this space. And you'll continue to see images a lot more quickly around in our news releases as well as our social media pages. Just as the cameras have been an ever-increasing part of criminal cases, we are relying more often on our air support unit to track suspects and relay information to both officers on the ground and to our Real-Time Crime Center investigators. Since you joined us from the unveiling of the new Falcon 1 helicopter in June, our air support unit has continued to be a force multiplier across this city. So far this year, Falcon has responded to more than 1,100 calls for service, performed more than 1,000 traffic checks, and assisted in more than 160 arrests across the city. Just last week, Falcon tracked a vehicle that had been carjacked in the 1300 block of Kenilworth Avenue Northeast as it crossed the Anacostia River over into our 5th district. Falcon was monitoring the vehicle and gave officers an on-the-ground, moment-by-moment update of the vehicle's location. Once the vehicle came to a stop, officers moved in and were able to make 3 arrests for unarmed carjacking, and the carjacked vehicle was recovered. Falcon allowed for the safe monitoring of that suspect vehicle without the high risks that are associated sometimes with vehicle pursuits. Thanks to that work, 3 suspects who posed an imminent risk to our city were taken into custody. That's the work of our Air Support Unit day in and day out. Oftentimes, I don't think they get enough credit for the work that they do, but I'm certainly grateful for the many upgrades that have been made to our new helicopter, and we will ensure that we will continue to invest and perform critical missions throughout this year. As we are also investing in our technology, I have been intentional since becoming chief about listening to and investing in our community. I tasked the team when I first arrived with ensuring that in every single district we would host public safety walks. I've attended countless meetings in every ward of our city. The concerns that I've heard from our community are drivers for all the initiatives that I've gone through this morning. We also work very hard to ramp up our efforts in encouraging and engaging community, hosting thousands of events over the last year. Our community wants to hear from us and they want to see us, and we will continue to be ever present in our community. That desire to see MPD's presence and have an easy access point to our city resources was a reason behind the mayor's idea for safe commercial corridor hubs, launched earlier this year. The goal of these spaces was to create a storefront for a menu of government resources. And these spaces were to create opportunities for multiple community relations, public safety, human services, behavioral health agencies, all under one umbrella where we could provide real-time resources for members of our communities. This creates another space and opportunity for the community to come and interact directly with MPD officers as well as members across DC government. The first hub launched in February on 8th Street in Chinatown. Since the hub's launch, the area has seen a dramatic crime reduction, including a nearly 90% drop in violent crime, a nearly 40% reduction in property crime, and a 47% drop in total crime. These reductions are pivotal in a corridor that is important to our success of our city. And beyond the hub, we've also increased our presence in the area, particularly during events at our Capital One Arena. Our first district and Special Operations Division have worked closely with Monumental Sports and Entertainment to ensure we are positioning resources effectively and making the area safe for everyone coming to enjoy sports, concerts, as well as special events. We've also seen significant reductions around our Anacostia hub since its launch in May. We've seen a 50% drop in violent crime, a 21% drop in property crime, and a 26% drop in overall crime in our Anacostia area. Our hope is that these spaces will continue to serve our community well and function as access points for resources from both MPD and all of our partnering agencies. Our safe commercial corridor hubs are just one way we've expanded our interactions with our community. As I've said before, listening and then acting upon the concerns of our community we serve is certainly my top priority. Each of our patrol district has a commitment to community outreach tasks with organizing events, and they have their finger on the pulse with every district from block to block. This year, our community outreach teams have hosted more than 2,100 events with nearly 900 partner agencies and community groups. That's an average of more than 6 events per day, connecting us with more than 90,000 residents. Many of you are aware of the major annual events we host, like our National Night Out, our Shop with a Cop, but every single day our outreach teams are in our neighborhoods organizing community safety walks, hosting a coffee with the cop, hosting a shop with the cop, and even getting out of their cruisers together for birthday parades. Whatever it takes, our community outreach team rises to the challenge. Nothing is more important to us than upholding the trust of our community that we serve. And that's why we continue to ensure that we're providing spaces for relationship building. This is why I host every month a Chiefs Youth Advisory Council, where we bring in young people from across the city with our school resource officers to ensure that our students also have a stake and a say in how we are addressing crime across the city. It's also why we host the Community Engagement Academy to give residents a fresh perspective and a peek inside the work that MPD is doing every day. It's why I host the Chiefs Citizens Advisory Council to ensure that the concerns of our community are being heard directly from me. It is why we have our Chiefs Faith Advisory Council to find ways to address issues facing our residents from a faith-based perspective. And it's also why our patrol district leaders are committed to meeting with our advisory neighborhood commissioners to make sure their concerns on every street across this city is being heard. We know the community wants to hear from us, and we want our cruisers to be out of their office, we want our officers, to be out of their cruisers, making sure that we are engaging with our community. As I observed the impact of how our members were showing up daily to drive crime down, the impact we were making in our community, and all that I was hearing from residents and business owners during community walks, I took some time to think about a new tagline that captured the essence of what we're doing. A tagline that will reflect on how we are showing up across the city, and one that would be impactful in helping the MPD family understand their role in bringing the tagline to life and how we work, how we support each other, take care of each other, and how we support our community. So after a year in my role as chief, I rolled out MPD's new tagline, policing with purpose and serving with care. Every member of the agency is making a difference by doing all that it is asked of them and even more. Their dedication, relationship-based policing, listening, serving the community with empathy and compassion, and building mutual relationships of trust and respect is making an impact. I can say that the Metropolitan Police Department is truly policing with purpose and serving with care, and I'm proud of the men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department. I will now turn it over to Deputy Mayor Lindsay Appiah.
Thank you, Chief. So I'm not going to take too long, but we believe, and the mayor has always challenged us to have a whole of government response to crime and to reducing crime in our city. And so what you see is, in the next slide, is what that looks like for us. In this slide, you'll see the reductions that we have in our ones areas. Our violence interrupters and the work that's being done at the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement is critical in helping us to reduce gun violence in some of our most at-risk neighborhoods. And so today, there's a 35% reduction in gun violence in the 25 priority communities served by our ones violence interrupters. Their coordination in helping us to address retaliatory violence has helped us to see these types of reductions, which are so critical to helping us have our citywide reductions. And so you see those numbers here. You heard the chief talk about our Thrive efforts, but nearly 4, sometimes 5 days a week, there are multi-agency efforts happening across our city, supporting the Thrive efforts in our nightlife corridors. And you can see it truly is all of the agencies working together at the same time, which takes commitment, and our partners across cluster are doing this, like I said, 4 to 5 days a week. And so you can see alcohol, ABCA doing license enforcement. We have health out with us doing health inspections. That says rate abatements, but it's actually rat abatements by DC Health, in Pounds, DPW, a truly fantastic partner doing our parking enforcement. We have for-hire vehicles out with us, with DOB. You have Fire EMS, who you don't often think about in this context, but they are distributing fentanyl testing strips and Narcan kits. And so you can see all of this, all of the agency logos. Literally, these are agencies that are out together, working in spaces Wednesdays and Thursdays, and then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday evenings. And that's really, to us, what it looks like to have a whole of government approach. We also believe strongly, these are all prevention efforts, which is an important part of our ecosystem. And one of the things, I come from the juvenile justice world, is making sure that our kids get to school, because we know that truancy is a big indicator for juvenile justice system involvement. And so our Safe Passage program, Public Safety and Justice, has partnered with our education partners from the beginning. But last year, Safe Passages was moved into our office with the understanding that when we talk about a credible contact continuum, that part of what helps us to drive down crime and get our kids to school safely is the type of communication and coordination that comes across our system. So we have nearly over 200 Safe Passage ambassadors across our city every day, working together with violence interrupters, with schools, with MPD, with Metro Transit, on an everyday, all-day basis to help us make sure our kids are getting to and from school safely, and also helping us to address the issues that might be happening in school and out that are driving crime in our city. So critical component. And then also our partnership. You've heard us talk about policy, policing, and our partnerships with our community. There are grants given out, hundreds of millions, really, of grants across our government that we would say are really part of crime reduction and crime prevention, from food access to out-of-school time grants to grants to that are given to our businesses, our bids, and other development cores that are helping us to increase presence. A lot of what we know that helps us to reduce crimes is eyes and ears. And so you could see here our Safe Commercial Corridors grant program that we started last year as a pilot, and that has expanded nearly double this year. In our bids and corridors, I think we have 12 this fiscal year that are helping us to both increase presence with ambassadors, but doing things like helping businesses to fund alarm systems and cameras, which are huge to us, and making sure that those are linked into our real-time crime center. And so what we would say is this, that we are encouraged by our progress this year. We are. But we know there's more to do. As the chief said, and as the mayor always tasked us with, as long as anybody is a victim of crime in our city, that is one too many. And so public safety is now and will remain our #1 priority. We know it's the #1 priority for our residents and visitors, and it's ours across our government. And so we are very committed to continuing the momentum that we've achieved this year into 2025 and making sure our city is safer and stronger. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Chief, for a very detailed update on our progress. And we will take some questions on public safety.
Good morning, Randy Bass with DC News Now. Appreciate this overview today. Were there any initiatives this year or programs that did not work as you expected them to? Anything that we won't be taking with us into 2025? Anything that, just didn't have the effect that you had intended for it to?
So I want to believe, and I will say, and I think the numbers kind of demonstrate that every initiative that we put in worked. I think one of the things about crime is that it's really hard to determine what people are going to do and how they're going to do it, but it's our responsibility to ensure that we're looking at the data, that we're tracking it, that we're looking at not just the data, but what does the policy allow us to do. And so with creating those initiatives, knowing from my perspective that we have true crime fighters here at the district within the MPD, and my intent was to ensure that we had those initiatives in place, that those same initiatives that we launched this year, we're not adding anything new, we will carry them into next year because it's working.
I'm gonna follow up if I can. Of course, there's a regional component to all of this too. I know your focus is the district.
Sorry, say it again.
There's a regional component to all of this too, I'm sure. Your focus is the district, but of course the district does not exist in a bubble. Right. How are you working with neighboring agencies, other leaders there, other chiefs in the region? What kind of conversations are you having at the regional level too?
We talk almost, if not daily, sometimes twice a day, depending on the types of crime. As I've stated before, criminals have no jurisdictional boundaries, so it's so very important for me as the chief, the leader in law enforcement in this space, to make sure that I'm working with PG County, Montgomery County, the chiefs in Virginia, to ensure that we are all tracking the same thing. Most of us are dealing with the same crime, right? Laws and rules and regulations and certain jurisdictional boundaries are sometimes different than here in the District of Columbia. So I think we take ideas from each other, and as you know, a lot of what you saw here in DC even last year with respect to retail crime, theft, and things like that was happening across the United States. So it wasn't isolated to MPD, but it's certainly very important for me and my team to ensure that we are really in the trenches with our federal, state, and local partners in addressing crime here in the region.
I think it was really apparent when we were first talking about this center, and before it was even, or the RTCC, before it was built out. I joined the chief, and there were either chiefs or high-level professional folks just about from every agency in the region who were committed to being a part of our efforts. And I think it also sends a very clear message to people who would do crime in the district and run to Maryland or run to Virginia or run to the counties to know that this network of cameras and back and forth is really critical to solving crime if it happens. So that's important. It also magnifies the reach of our cameras in a very significant way. So I've learned over the years that the availability of this technology and the communication back and forth not only deters crime, but it helps our officials solve crime.
Good morning. Thank you guys for today's update. I wanted to ask, I know Deputy Apia as well as Mayor, you both mentioned government as a whole as well as policies to support some of the work that the district wants to do. In relation to that, are there any legislation or policies you guys are working on to help address some of the repeat offenders that has been mentioned? I know Chief, you mentioned it's a small group that you've noticed with robberies and things like that to help address that. And specifically with juveniles, there's been a discussion of questioning the length of time they can be held due to the current policy. So anything being worked on right now to address some of the repeat offenders?
Well, as you know, earlier in the year, we introduced a bill called Uplift, and I'll ask the Deputy Mayor to say more about it. But it really had a couple of thrusts. How we get young people who have committed crimes in the system where we can help them. And so that would limit the type of diversions that are available for young people. It would also speed up whether a young person is committed to the system or not, a mandatory interaction with their families and stakeholders. We think not only is that going to help impact the number of children who stay in school, but it will also give us the opportunity to require families who interact with MPD to be in a system of accountability for sure, but we view our system for juveniles as a system of care. And sometimes it has to be mandated, and that's what we think Uplift does. We know that the council is working on some juvenile justice bills. We would have preferred for them to focus on Uplift, and I intend to reintroduce it if it doesn't pass the council this session.
Thank you for having this. My first question is just about why you're so sure that local policy changes are the reason for the drop in crime. When you speak with researchers, they're often extremely hesitant to make those kinds of causal analyses. And in this case, there has been a national drop in violent crime and homicides and shootings. And so it might appear that DC is just now joining that trend. So what's your response to that? Why are you so sure that what you did is the reason for this drop?
This is what I know. When crime goes up, it's our fault. When crime goes down, it's somebody else's light gain, right? Is that the theory behind your question? When crime goes up, blame the mayor. When crime goes down, certainly the things that we put in place couldn't have anything to do with that. And, you know, I'm not going to go back and forth with whatever researchers you're pointing to. This is what I know about crime. When it goes up, it's my responsibility to work with all the stakeholders, work with the community, work with the policymakers, and do everything that we know how to influence those trends. Would it have gone down absent our trends? I don't know, but I don't think so. And here's why. I don't think so because I know that the people being held now and who are going to trial are the ones who are using guns in our community. They're not in the community, and the gun crime is going down. We have work to do. I know that the people who were carjacking our residents are being held when they weren't before, and guess what? Carjackings are down almost 50%. So I just want to look at our most immediate experience and know that we have not thrown a net out in the city and say we want to drag everybody in. We didn't do that. But we have asked every part of our system to hold people accountable who use guns, adults and juveniles, to hold people accountable who are committing robberies in our community, adults and juveniles. And we think all of those things, with a lot of focus on not just accountability systems, but opportunity systems, are driving crime down in the district.
I just have a question about the Road Act as well. So the council postponed its vote on that, and there was a goal to work with your administration and come up with some changes that people felt good about. What progress has been made? Have there been changes made to the bill? What discussions have you had with the council about that?
We are open to discuss anything or any changes with the council. I have made clear some very specific items that we think need to be changed. We don't think at a time. I think I read in your paper, or somebody reported here, the very difficult resource problem that the DC Superior Court has right now. Very significant problem. It's only going to get worse next year. It'll be even worse if the 10 judges that are sitting at the Senate right now don't get passed. And this act would actually give them more work for young people that have already been found guilty or responsible. So, you know, that's not a good use of our time. That's not a good use of our very limited resources at the DC Superior Court. I don't support that.
Yes, Chief, I was wondering if you could tell a little bit about any changes and trends for hate crimes. I noticed on the MPD website chart, the data show that the 3 highest categories continues to be race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation and gender identity in terms of the victims.
And so I think what we will do is, what we've been doing is really making sure that as the reports are coming in, or the incident reports are coming in, that we're ensuring that our special liaison branch is getting out to those communities and really working with community to ensure that those types of hate crimes are not increasing across our city. I will say that the 2 or 3 previous cases that were deemed to be hate crimes, we were able to make some arrests to ensure that that was not the case. We will continue to work with our community, work with our members, our LGBTQ, our other groups and organizations to ensure that we are getting the right information out and making sure that people, when they see something, they say something and share that information with us.
Chief, Rosbelis Quiñones with Telemundo 44. For our immigrant community, we are interested in knowing if your department have had any interactions with members of the Tren de Aragua. There is a federal warning about their presence on our region, and we would like to know if you have had any interactions with them, what kind of crimes, and how is your department responding to that warning?
And so our violent crime suppression, whenever there's, first of all, let me start by saying that, you know, whenever there's any trend or gang or group activity across the country, our crime intelligence unit is very engaged and involved in those conversations. I think there had been at one point some conversations about that group being either in the area or around the area. Our violent crime suppression division has been doing a lot of investigative and intelligence work. I won't go into it right now, but know that we are very focused on any group or gang that's coming into our city with respect to committing any type of violence or crime. And I can tell you we have been very concerned with what we've seen in some spaces across the U.S., but we will certainly keep our finger on the pulse if we determine that that group is locally here.
Any interactions?
Not at this moment.
Not at this moment. One more for
Can I
the
just
mayor?
add one other thing? Just so you know, we have violence interrupters as well who have expertise in working with Latino gangs, and so also working closely with MPD to make sure that they're getting information and interrupting any activity that might come from that segment as well. So want to add also on the prevention side that they're working hand in hand together.
Great, thank you. For the mayor, also for the immigrant community, is still DC a sanctuary city, and what will be your message for the immigrant community?
Well, my message is that DC is still DC. And nothing is going to change our values and the efforts that we have to support all of our residents, to encourage all of our residents to be active in the community, to call 911 if they need help or assistance, and to take advantage of the support that the city provides. All of that remains. I would say to our community that DC has never been involved in the enforcement of immigration laws, but we have to be mindful of what is coming from the federal government.
Beatrice Peterson, ABC News. So inauguration is coming up soon. I know the city has been preparing for it. Is there any new threats that may be facing the city? Anything that the public should be aware of?
Chief.
At this point, we have not received any credible or identifiable threats here in the city or in the region with respect to the inauguration.
Okay, thank you very much. Tom Sherwood from somewhere. I want to ask the mayor a question, but first, quickly, Chief, on this subject, has your police department been contacted by the New York City Police in terms of the shooting in New York, in terms of any video you might have trying to track down the shooter in New York?
So we were contacted over the weekend specifically with respect to whether or not the subject or the person of interest had any ties to, and or if he or she had traveled from the District of Columbia. We worked with Amtrak to look at video, and we did not find that to be the case.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Mayor, someone just mentioned the inauguration. It's no secret that President-elect Trump has attacked this city, knowingly or not, viciously calling it an embarrassment to the nation, filthy, crime-ridden. Has the Trump transition, reached out to you at all in terms of what it plans for the nation's capital? Have you reached out to it?
Yes, of course. As I've already said, we have reached out. We have been in contact with the transition team / incoming administration, and we expect to have more detailed conversations.
Specifically about public safety.
Yes, I've talked to them about public safety and also about what I see as our shared promises for the district, having to do with a vibrant downtown, well-utilized public buildings, and things that we can do together. And I specifically talked about, much like the presentation you've heard here, how we have been very focused on driving down crime. And so let me just say this, and I think that everybody who visits our city or people who visit our city comment on how clean and green it is. Somebody that was at an event the other day, somebody from out west, I don't remember which city, and how well run our city is. And the facts indicate that as well. Do we have areas that we want to focus on and be better at? Of course. Being a safe city is up there, and making sure we continue to be a beautiful, clean, and green city is a priority.
What response have you gotten? Have you gotten an indication that the Trump administration wants to work with you, or do they want to direct you?
I have gotten the indication that we are going to meet, and no indication. What was the last part? Or that they want to what?
Rather than work with you, tell you what to do.
No, I did not get that impression.
So just clarifying on what you just said, you've gotten the indication that we are going to meet. Does that mean you've gotten the indication that you and President-elect Trump are going to meet sometime?
No, that we would meet with officials.
With the team. So given, if I can kind of dovetail off this President-elect conversation, given what the President-elect has said, his threats to take over the D.C. Police Department and safety and crime in Washington, D.C., how important is it for you for the President-elect to hear this presentation, for the Republican members of Congress who are concerned about their staff and themselves? How important, and considering whether or not to take that drastic step of taking over your police department, the city police.
So, Mark, I'll start my response as I have with you previously on this subject. We are a nation of laws, and the law would allow a president of the United States in an emergency for a limited period of time to, as you say, take over MPD. Those are extraordinary circumstances that we are not in. So I don't want to leave any DC resident with the impression that a wand could be raised and then that would happen. It would require extraordinary circumstances and or a challenge to very clear law. But the second part of your question, and maybe more importantly, I want DC residents to hear this. And I know that you all communicate about crime, every crime. When we had a spike in crime, that's all you communicated. And I want to communicate our progress. More than that, I want to communicate what I think has been helpful. Now, could somebody say, well, no, that wasn't it? Well, maybe, but that's not what we hear in the community when we're talking about drug-free zones. That's not what we hear when a carjacker who has done 8 carjackings has been arrested. That's just not what we're hearing. What people are telling us is thank you for being focused on accountability and keep up the work. We still have work to do. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Can I ask you an off-topic question? I've been asking every time I see you. The RFK legislation.
Oh,
any progress?
RFK.
Well, the clock is ticking. I've only got a few more days.
The clock is ticking, and my answer is the same. It's a good piece of legislation. It's good for the district. It's good for the team. We know it's great for the federal government, and it's good for the entire region, and it should pass. So we have gone through every stage in the House. We've come out of committee in the Senate, and the Senate, as it does, can attach this type of bill to go to the entire floor before it closes session, and we hope it does.
I know you were on the Hill. I heard you were on the Hill last week.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a confirmation? Yes, you were having meetings on the Hill last.
So, Mark, I don't want to be coy. I don't. And that's not my intention. And I want to be as forthcoming as possible. But I intend to keep my discussions private as it relates to getting this bill passed. And let me be clear what this bill is about. It transfers RFK to the district, 177 acres. The state of RFK at this time is deplorable. The stadium must come down. The sea of parking behind it, not only is it ugly, it's not safe. And the National Park Service has it has vast responsibilities. RFK has not risen to the top of its priority list. What we have said as the district is the district and our taxpayers are willing to step in the place of the Park Service and invest in that property so it is productive again. And that is what this bill is about. If it doesn't pass, we would go back to square one. And the Park Service would still have 177 acres that is a blight on the District of Columbia. So that must change. And that's what the transfer of this land is about.
If I could just one last clarification on the Telemundo question about sanctuary city. When you were asked if DC is a sanctuary city, your answer was DC is still DC. You don't enforce. Do you consider, is DC a sanctuary city?
I've answered that question, Mark, and that's what it's always been, that we don't enforce, we enforce our own laws. We've never been responsible for enforcing immigration laws, and that remains the case.
Would you consider it officially, would you call DC a sanctuary city? I think that's where you've kind of stopped short for some time. I don't recall you actually referring to it as a sanctuary.
I've only always referred to our interaction with the federal government as it relates to enforcing immigration laws, and nothing about that has changed.
Mayor, on this subject, isn't it possible that the Congress could pass legislation to require you to cooperate with immigration officials?
That's not what I said, Tom. What I said is we don't enforce immigration laws.
One more.
Well, I don't think Congress is going to make us the INS. So that would come with a lot of money and a lot more officers. Yes.
Oh, sorry. So I know biannually you provide the report regarding juvenile crime. Can you give us just an update on how we stand so far in terms of juvenile crime?
So one of the things I'll say about year to date, we're up 5% with our juvenile arrests. And we believe that there is a small number of juveniles who are committing the same crimes over and over again. Every Monday and Thursday I have in-person crime briefings, and the Violent Crime Suppression Division, most of the commanders, we're still seeing some of the same offenders, but our team will still continue to go out and make those arrests. What I can say about community and some parents, even last night, we had an incident with 3 juveniles where a parent called us and said that her son placed a gun under a pillow. And that's a big shift for us. You know, we oftentimes, parents, sometimes we talk about accountability, but to see parents being engaged in a space with helping us to solve some of we ended up making 3 arrests. And it started out as a carjacking, and Falcon was up, and we ended up chasing these individuals. And I say that about juveniles, again, it's some of the same repeat offenders. And we are working very closely with the Attorney General's office. I met with them last week, so that we can continue these discussions about, as the mayor stated, placing our young people in spaces where we can care for them and not have them continue to commit these same crimes over and over is our focus.
Chief, following up on that, I know you talked about the engagement in the community and that going up as well. As it relates to juveniles, can you highlight some of the programs that MPD is involved in, specifically some of the schools you've seen most impacted by whether it be gun violence or just being involved in crime with juveniles?
Yeah, we have an entire division, a youth and family engagement division that is specifically focused on working with juveniles and their families. At one point, we were told to reduce our school resource officers in our schools. We combined a particular number of members, gave them the appropriate training so we can multiply, if you will, our school resource officers, because that's really important too. These young people begin to trust those law enforcement personnel that are in our schools, and we gather a lot of information with respect to where young people are coming to schools with guns, and we're able to disrupt some of that behavior. We're able to engage in mediation, if you will, with some of our parents, and I do applaud our principals who have been very engaged on a bi-weekly basis, if not a weekly basis, with meeting with members of our leadership team to talk about what's going on in our schools on a daily basis. And so we will continue those efforts because, as the mayor has stated, it's really an all-of-government approach. We talk to DHS, who is also instrumental in having family programs for young people who have been either placed in the system or coming out of the system, and making sure that their resources are provided not just for the young person but for the family as a whole. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Kate Ryan with WTOP, and just in connection with this, can you make any kind of correlation or relational conclusion to what's driving the drop? In other words, what demographic? Is it more juveniles that had been committing crimes in categories that you are seeing more arrests, or is it adults? Is there any way to tell? I know that's very granular, but I think people feel, for example, when kids are back in school, we see the juvenile crime drop off in certain categories. What are you seeing there?
I think policy has helped us a lot this year. And both during the summertime, we saw the numbers really start to drop during the summer months as well as during the school time. But I think policy has given us a little bit more teeth, if you will, to hold folks accountable. I think our officers feel like they can be police officers because of some of the policy changes. And I think, again, it's really an all-of-government approach. I can't tell you right off the top of my head the delta between adults versus juveniles, but we have seen a reduction in juveniles committing crimes. But what we've seen is that there are still some of the same repeat offenders who are committing crimes across our city. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks for your knees. Mayor Bowser, I don't know if it's part of your Uplift initiative, but you talked to survivors of violent crime committed by young people, and they say, why are these kids getting out at 21? The law should change. They should be able to be put away for longer periods of time. And parents of these violent offenders, beating to death Reggie Brown and the DJ who passed recently, 14 and 16-year-olds. What do you say to that? Do you want some of the sentencing to go beyond age 21 for certain juvenile offenders? And should parents, in some cases, be held responsible?
Well, juvenile offenders and the courts and prosecutors determine whether their circumstances merit them being treated as adults. And in that case, they're subject to the adult system. And I wouldn't stand here saying I know every circumstance where I think that's possible, and I think it's in the right place with judges to determine, with prosecutors and judges to determine if it's an adult crime. And I also think in some cases, parents who have acted recklessly, we should connect them to responsibility for what their children do.
One question.
Yeah, Matt Delaney with the Washington Times. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, but I believe when Secure DC passed this spring, there was a late amendment that required the pretrial detention provisions to sunset after 225 days. That timeline has passed. Are you worried that could upend the progress you guys have made?
It hasn't passed. It hasn't passed yet, and we are working with counsel. There was, it's in several months. There's a study that's supposed to be done. But obviously, we believe, we proposed it in Safer Stronger, that these are important parts of what is helping us to drive down crime. So just like in any other policy space, we're certainly working with counsel, with the prosecutors and otherwise to make sure we land in the right place on what tools they need to continue to help us drive down crime.
Do you know when that deadline is going to be?
I think it's February or March, like the actual 225 from the date of the passage, but we can get back to you specifically when it is.
We'll just do one more there.
Two questions. First, what has the National Guard request been put in for additional support for the inauguration? And I remember earlier last month, the city was requesting 4,000 additional police officers for support. Has that goal been met, or are we still looking for additional officers?
Chief, officers for inauguration.
Yes, ma'am. So we are like 3,900 and change with the law enforcement personnel. And as of last week, I've also received requests from other police agencies across the U.S. asking if they could participate in the inauguration. So we are still open with receiving requests to come and support us for the inauguration. It relates to the National Guard.
I think I got a note that our request for January 6th has been submitted, and we're still working on the inauguration request.
Can you tell us what you've submitted a request for with regard to January 6th and 20th?
For MP to assist with civil disturbance units.
Is there a number attached?
50 to 100.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.